Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at the Damage Report. Still under lockdown following the first day of the DNC, which was an event, sort of. We're going to get into it. Who's we? It's me, but also a new face for you on today. Yasmin Khan, political commentator and video blogger, joins us for the first time. Yasmin, how's it going?
Going really, really good. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm glad to have you here. I'm excited to talk the DNC with you. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about, whether there's going to be an election and what it's going to look like, the coronavirus, and all of that. What about you? How's the political week going for you so far?
Same. A lot of the same. A lot of, distress and then finding hope somewhere and then just hope, continuing on with life.
Yeah. So I gave you a little bit of an intro there, but I know some people might be familiar with you from your appearances on The Common Room on TYT's Twitch channel. But for those who might be seeing you for the first time, tell us a little bit about your work.
I am a video blogger. I make videos that kind of explain really complex things that you may have seen in the news, but you're not really sure how it all fits into your real life, how it affects American politics, how it affects international politics. Just kind of giving you the history of how we got to where we are today and what it means going forward. And
Awesome.
in a way that's easy to understand. It's a little bit palatable. So.
Exactly. And I think I mentioned on The Common Room, one of the things that's really impressive about your work is that you try to broach topics that tend towards people having very incendiary views on, like people like to fight it out on them, but you try to explain things in a level-headed way, and I respect that. These are complicated topics that you delve into.
Yeah, I try to. So
I think that's all you can do. I don't even try. So also, we're going to be talking about one of those topics later on in the show when we talk about Israel, the UAE, Jerusalem, and all of that. By the way, for everyone who is currently watching the show, please feel free to hit the like button and you can share the stream. Let more people know that the show is active. We're going to be responding throughout to your comments and Twitches and tweets and all of that. Super chats as well. By the way, we're already getting some comments. Yasmin, one commenter asks, the first thing, this is what they always ask any new guests on the show, do you have any pets?
No, I don't. But right now there's a bird that's trapped in the garage and he won't leave. So maybe it doesn't count.
You didn't trap him. He trapped himself, basically.
Just found his way into the garage and that's where he lives now. I've left the garage door open so he can leave and he's just, this is my new home. So I guess technically I have a pet. When I was a kid, I had a turtle and my brother let it go.
Cool.
Beardsley Park.
Yeah, of course, Beardsley Park.
Okay, so my brother let the turtle go in the lake at Beardsley Park. So that was the last.
I think my father might have gotten us some turtles from Beardsley Park, actually.
I'm pretty sure it came from Beardsley Park, and then my brother went and took it back.
It's the circle of life.
Yeah, my house was right across the street from Beardsley Park, so we used to just walk over there all the time.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, well, so we have a tradition on the show where when we hit 1,000 likes, that means at the end of the show, generally, we will show one of our pets. So that's going to be difficult to do, but if the bird happens to fly into the room you're recording from, feel free to point the camera at it. And yes. Okay, so we're going to launch into our topics. We've got a lot that we're going to be getting to, and unfortunately not in the form I wanted to get to it, but hey, what are you going to do? Why don't we start talking about the DNC? So last night we had the first night of the DNC, or at least what passes for the DNC or for indeed any event in 2020. It was generally pre-recorded speeches, a few live ones, some commercials and music videos and things like that. I've got a few highlights that I want to talk about, but Yasmin, I'm curious, overall, did it meet your expectations? Did it exceed or fall below your?
No, if I really had expectations going in, I didn't put a whole lot of thought into what was going to be happening, but I think I just didn't care either. And that being said, it probably meant whatever I was expecting to see. There was a lot of just platitudes and a lot of Joe's a good guy, which is cool. It felt more like a campaign rally for Joe, which is fine. I'm sure we're going to talk about Bernie later and Michelle Obama, but everyone else was pretty forgettable, I would have said.
Did you have high hopes for Kasich's speech?
why is he there? Like I like the Democrats keep propping up Kasich like he's this hero of the right who saw the light and came over to the left, but he's not that. And
Hmm.
the reality is it's more dangerous, I think, that the Democrats are pandering to this former or current Republican. I don't even know what he is anymore.
Yeah.
And I didn't like what he had to say. I didn't like his insinuation that Joe is not going to become more progressive once he gets into office. I didn't like it, just felt very presumptuous and almost entitled. I
Hmm.
think Frank or you were talking about it in your wrap up. It's not a good sign going forward, and he doesn't have that level of Republican support that he can start pandering to that demographic at this point.
Yeah, or that, I mean, he might, but he shouldn't. But like, so that you can get a
Sure.
percentage point of the vote.
Yeah.
What's the
It,
point of that? And it felt almost like a threat, kind of. I know that that's sort of what Jenks said last night, but it's like,
yeah.
no, he's not going to turn hard left. He better not, or else he'll lose
It
the bit of
felt
the
so
Republican Party that
passive
supports Kasich.
aggressive, didn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
it felt weird, and he was like out in a field or something. I don't even know where he was. It looked like he
Can
was
we
on
put
a
up that picture?
yeah. Oh yeah, the picture was on Twitter, and I think it was Brett Ehrlich. He posted it, yeah, on Instagram. It
It
was
is
weird.
bizarre.
Yeah, and why did he stand right there, like at the apex of wherever he stand? I don't know. It's very bizarre.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the scene near the end of Castaway where Tom Hanks is like standing in the middle of nowhere, wondering which way his life is going to go. But that was a meaningful moment because we had been there with Tom Hanks through his struggle
Yeah,
and coming to grips with things. Kasich's struggle has been to take away women's ability to exercise, the freedom and choice over their own bodies, to destroy unions, and provide tax cuts to the wealthy. Basically, everything that Donald Trump wants to do, but he
hmm
doesn't like Trump while he wants to do it. I don't know.
I don't think Kasich has ever really segued away from his Republican roots, at least not as much as he likes to pretend he has, especially now that he's a guest at the DNC. So he doesn't like Trump, and that's about it. It's like what you said, that's where it ends for that. It's not like he's for Democratic policies necessarily or progressive policies, that not at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, oh god, so frustrating.
Okay.
There were some parts that I thought were pretty effective. So there was, let's see, we had Kristen Urquiza. She is one of the many Americans that has tragically lost a family member due to the pandemic. She lost her father, and I would love to play some of the video for you, but unfortunately we can't. So she said that her father trusted Trump, as so many have, including perhaps Herman Cain, most notably. And she said that her father had a pre-existing condition, and it
Right.
was trusting the wrong person, and he died after a struggle with coronavirus. I think it's going to be an interesting question to see how much they really focus on the pandemic. I imagine they're going to quite a bit, but this was I think, a pretty effective first volley, if that is going to be a focus for the DNC.
Yeah, I thought that of a lot of the speakers that were there, the real people speakers, that one did stand out to me as well. I think there is a video for it, but
Oh, we're just having some idiot of issue.
yeah, some
Oh, we
issues.
do? We do? Okay, you noticed that I didn't. Okay, let's do it. Let's go to the video. Okay, so that was what the video looked like, at least.
Technical difficulties. Oh.
Oh my God, this year there is going to be nothing left of me or the damage report by November 3rd. But anyway, no, it's totally understandable. There's tech issues all the time, and honestly, the vast majority of the time, it is actually nobody's fault.
Joe
It's just
supports
things
race.
fail. I heard a little bit of Bernie there. That made me feel better. Okay, nobody touch anything.
Bernie.
Okay, so anyway, the video is available, and it is very sad. I mean, if you know someone who has died, like I had a close family member that passed away in a similar sort of situation. I think that's going to be quite effective. The question will be how many people are watching any of this, because this is like I was at the last two conventions. Those were big, like, impressive things. These just feel so shrunken down and shriveled by comparison for a number of different reasons. Yeah, so we'll see how many people actually tune in.
Yeah, I mean, I had it on and I was watching, but even then it was really hard for me to stay focused and engaged for a lot of it.
Hmm.
And I mean, I do this all the time and the production value was good. I'll say that. It seemed like they worked really hard on what they did. But besides that, wasn't super impressed. Or it
Yeah.
just didn't feel necessary. And I think I saw somewhere on Twitter that they were talking about, is a convention like this even necessary at this point anymore? And I was like, I don't think so. Like we're all on Twitter. I think back in like maybe the 90s, it had more of an appeal and more of a purpose. But now
Hmm.
everybody's on Twitter. Everybody gets the news all the time anyway. And the people who are engaged in that sphere, they're also the same ones who are watching the DNC. So I would
Yeah.
imagine.
I mean, look, if it could be, if we didn't have the pandemic, if you could have a big actual convention with big speeches and stuff like that, I think that there is some value to that. The
Yeah.
question will be, how much do we get that approaches that? I thought Bernie Sanders' speech, which I'm going to read a little bit from, was good. Michelle Obama, while not, focused on the substance like Bernie was effective in terms of, I think, communicating, and I think it was very well received. But
Mhm.
like, we don't need three more nights of Amy Klobuchar's mom jokes and Kasich standing in a field. Eva Longoria was good. Like, I
Yeah,
could,
she
I
was
could go for
fine.
more of that.
Yeah, she was fine.
She was
I
good.
think Michelle was, yeah, she's very effective, I think. I mean, I like her. I know she's not as progressive as we would like her to be, or maybe she is. I don't know.
Hmm.
But I think that a lot of what she said went beyond a lot of the platitudes and the nonsense that we had been hearing the whole rest of the night for what, an hour and a half prior to that. And I think what she said needed to be said and people wanted her to say it. They wanted to hear, and it's really hard to argue that anything she said was bad. Who's going to say that being morally just and being a good person and not voting for Trump, that those are bad things. But at the same time, people need to hear it and they want to hear it and they want to be reassured that there's somebody out there who has hope in the whole process.
Yeah.
And then I like that she closed it with that. I thought she did a good job of closing it that way. And I like that she also came after Bernie.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And she had an actual, like, legit speech.
Yeah.
Bernie had a chunk of a speech. Everyone else had a campaign ad, and that was it. And the
Yeah.
one funny thing, and I'll have more to say about Michelle in just a moment, but the one interesting thing was I've been stewing in rage over the decision to give AOC just 60 seconds for the last week.
Yes.
And now, like, after watching the first half of the first night, I was like, oh, okay, 60 seconds is about what everyone's getting if they're lucky. Maybe this isn't so bad,
I
actually.
had the same feeling. I was watching it and I was like, oh, all these people, they're just like boom, boom, boom. Because when you hear 60 seconds, what can possibly be said in 60 seconds? Nothing.
Yeah,
But now I get it. It makes sense now.
yeah. So let's talk about the substance, though. While many of the speakers at the first night of the DNC were focused on Trump is bad for a number of reasons, which I mostly agree with, but I've heard it a million times, or
Right.
Joe's a good guy, which seems to be true. He has empathy and compassion and all of that, but I would like to see it attached to policy. Bernie Sanders, well, he gave a bit of that. And his mission that night was to try to get more progressives to be comfortable with the idea of supporting Joe Biden. The
Right.
way that he went about it, he tried to do what he always does, which is to ground it in an acknowledgement of our problems, what needs to be done to fix them, and what Joe Biden is actually supporting to potentially do that. So I want to read you just a little tiny bit. So he says, let me offer you just a few examples of how Joe will move us forward. Joe supports raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. He acknowledges that'll give 40 million workers a pay raise. He wants to make it easier for workers to join unions, create 12 weeks of paid family leave, fund universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds, make childcare affordable for millions of families, rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, fight the threat of climate change by transitioning us to 100% clean electricity over the next 15 years. That will create millions of good-paying jobs. He says that they disagree on the best path to universal health care coverage, but he has a plan that will greatly expand health care and cut the cost of prescription drugs, while also lowering the eligibility age of Medicare from 65 to 60. And he talks about him ending cash bail, ending private prisons and detention centers, and the school to prison pipeline. That little summary I just gave there from his speech was more acknowledgement of what can actually be done to solve problems in terms of policy than I believe, and I don't think I'm being too unfair, the entire rest of the night. Yasmin. Am I being fair or unfair in
I
saying
think
that?
that's fair. It was funny because in your after show, Jank asked you if you could remember anything that Klobuchar had said, and you were like, "Man, I don't know." And honestly, what did she say? I remember that weird joke that she made. Well, now I don't even remember the joke she made, but yeah, something. Oh, about the mail, like, oh, you'll have to do a change of address or something like that. That's what we were getting the whole night, was a bunch of those. And then stories, personal stories, whatever. But nobody talked about policy and how, the changes that they want are actually going to make it to the people. Bernie was the only one, and he was an hour and a half in, who did that. You know what else he did that I really, really enjoyed was that he addressed his millions of people who supported him during the primaries, which to me felt a little bit like a flex on Bernie's part. Like, yeah, I got a million people, but it was also a really good reminder, I think, to the Democrats that there are millions of Americans who generally vote Democratic who supported these really, really progressive ideals, and even really, really progressive as far as the Democrats would see them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that he keeps reminding people of that, because it's true. I mean, there's so much buy-in and support for all these platforms. Medicare for all, overwhelmingly Americans support that idea. So it's not unreasonable to expect your government to deliver that for you if they can, and they can. So.
Yeah, I would argue that sort of expectation is the whole point of having a democracy in the first place. We should be able to expect those sorts of things.
Yeah, and especially with Kasich's comment, I think it was kind of like a nice, no, we're still going to be a little bit more progressive. We're still going to go a little further left.
Yeah. So I think oh, good. We have those. Thank you. So I think that Bernie did a good job of doing what his mission there was, which was to try to press the party on the issues he cares about while pressing his supporters to support Joe Biden, which I know Bernie's going to get a lot of criticism for that, even from some people who supported him in the past, even though, like, you can't look at anything Bernie has done through the course of his career and find what he's doing right now to be inconsistent with that. He has always supported vigorous primary challenges, trying to expand the scope of the conversation politically, and then pragmatic political moves that have the best chance of delivering that outcome. In the same way that he supported Hillary Clinton in 2016, he's supporting Joe Biden this year. He would prefer it was him. I would prefer it was him. I'm sure a lot of people would, but that's not the situation we're in right now, and so he's proceeding accordingly.
It kind of reminds me, whenever I find people who voted for Trump back in 2016, and then they're disgruntled about everything he's done ever since then, it's like, well, what did you expect? And they're like, oh, well, I figured he would change once he got into office. I figured he would be a little less crazy once he got into office. I was like, why? I mean, he's always been that person, and this is what he's been consistent with even before he was running for president. So now I'm kind of hesitant to say that Democrats or progressives are thinking the same thing will happen with Joe Biden. But I think the big difference there, the big distinction, is that Joe Biden is already further left than Donald Trump is. And Bernie's message wasn't that Joe Biden will change and be more like us. It's still that we're going to have to work for these policies, but we just have a much better chance of pushing them through with Joe Biden there as opposed to Donald Trump. I think
exactly.
We got to remember that.
Yeah, there's no path where the next 4 years are fun and awesome and easy. It's just not going to happen. The question is, what do you want that fight to look like? How difficult do you want it to be? You can have it impossible, or you can have it very difficult and annoying and frustrating and depressing.
Yeah, especially when you consider just a Democratic cabinet would be amazing. Even having a full cabinet would be amazing. Just getting things done all over in different aspects of government. That's what needs to happen. That's what hasn't been happening this whole time for almost 4 years now.
But I did want to read a comment. So I got a statement from Josie Caballero. She was a candidate who was on the show several times, is now a delegate who is planning to vote for Bernie at the DNC. Josie gave us this statement saying, the convention has begun to the same empty platitudes we saw back in 2016. The DNC seems to think that pretty images and right-wing conservatives speaking for another centrist Democrat will inspire a nation to vote. Well, canned clapping and cheering will not convince anyone. And I agree. I don't know how effective it's going to be in rallying some conservatives to support him, but I think that if that is their strategy, and I wish that wasn't, I wish that they were inspiring more younger, disaffected and apathetic progressives and leftists and all of that to get involved. But if they are going to go for those conservatives, I mean, focusing on how Trump is crazy and Joe Biden's a decent guy, that's a way to do it. I guess.
I don't think it's going to be effective either as far as converting people. I think that it's only good for the people who are already going to vote for Joe Biden. And even then, they're just like, yeah, this is fine. They're not particularly riled up about it, or excited to go vote. But as far as the Republicans, if they're even tuning into something like this, I mean, we've been criticizing Donald Trump for how long? Since before he was elected, and hasn't done anything. That's not the messaging that they're looking for. All they do is say, oh, Democrats, oh, progressives, and then they kind of brush it off. And even if you have all the data to back up whatever you're saying, they don't care. They don't listen to it. I think the only thing that I've found that people really will vote for or against something is if it impacts their wallet, their bank account.
Yeah.
Or if they've been very, very specifically and directly affected by something, like if somebody they know died of COVID.
Yeah.
But beyond that, this isn't going to do it.
You mentioned COVID. That'll transition to one of the last things I want to say about this is one of the aspects of Michelle Obama's speech that I think was effective, and certainly was effective in angering Donald Trump, was when she said that he was in over his head. He's, a failure on these policies, including responding to the pandemic, and that he's not going to change. Like, it's not like becoming president just like it makes you into a different person or you really change all that much. Like, it reveals who you actually are, especially during a crisis. And clearly, she said, with 150,000 people having already died in America from this, he is a failure in that regard. So many people liked her remarks. Trump was asked about it this morning, and here is some of what he had to say about Michelle Obama's speech.
So we have to win the election. We can't play games. Get out and vote. Do those...
Michelle Obama's speech last night where she said that you're in over your head as the overall president.
Yeah, no, she was over her head, and frankly, she should have made the speech live, which she didn't do. She taped it, and it was not only taped, it was taped a long time ago because she had the wrong deaths. She didn't even mention the vice presidential candidate in the speech, and she gets these fawning reviews. If you gave a real review, it wouldn't be so fawning.
Okay, so yeah, she was over her head. So the funny thing about that, of course, is, look, of course he's not going to like Michelle Obama's speech until Melania gives a different version of it. Then he might like it. But anyway, it was like she had the deaths wrong. She said 150,000. What, did she record that a week ago? There's like 20,000 more people died, you dummy. You idiot. Get it right. I killed way more people. What an idiot. What a moron. That you think that owns her? That's not how it works.
I understand sometimes, and I really try to understand where he's coming from and how he thinks that these things are going to play out. Like, I saw on Twitter this morning, Michelle Obama was trending, and they were talking about her speech and how she was trying to take this moral high ground. But really, here's a video from her from, what was it, like 7 years ago or something, praising Harvey Weinstein. And I was like, why would you even bring this up? Because first of all, this was before all the allegations had come out about him. But then on top of that, like, there's pictures of your president with Epstein. Like, he's not any better. Even if Michelle Obama says something nice about Weinstein, it doesn't negate everything that Trump has said about similar figures, and he's, even now, like, he was, up until recently, he was talking positively about Maxwell,
Yeah.
So I don't know how much foresight they put into any of these arguments that they make. Seems like not a lot.
It's a weird one. And like when he makes that point, isn't he at least inspiring his fans to look up what the death count is? But I know that they don't believe that that's true either. They think that she was wrong, but they also don't, like, God knows what the average Trump fan thinks the actual death count is, or whether it matters.
They don't believe it,
They don't. It's frustrating. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the pandemic a little bit later on. Before we turn to other matters, why don't we check in with the audience and see what they've been up to? Okay, so I'm seeing an account on Twitch named Yasmin Khan. Is that you?
Maybe.
Interesting.
Oh, it's my mom. It's probably my mother.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay, that is adorable. Saying Kasich, hello, Yasmin's mom. Saying Kasich was standing at the crossroads, as mentioned in the first sentence of his speech. No, I get that. I just don't think it was worth it. I don't know. That's weird. Like, if I give a speech and I mention how Wall Street is screwing us over, I can just film it here. I don't have to go to Wall Street to do that. I don't know. It seemed weird. Galfar on Twitch says having Kasich on the DNC last night just confirms that the DNC is now a center-right party and in no way whatsoever a left-leaning party. Well, yeah, I don't think a lot of people would consider it to be a left-leaning party. That is certainly the case. Let's see. On the Super Chats, Brian says, remember, Biden does not have empathy for younger generations and student loans. I don't know if student loans were actually mentioned last night really at all. AJ, thank you for your Super Chat. Charles Massey says, why did they even ask Trump for his opinion? Surprised he didn't call Michelle a nasty woman. Yeah, no, that's probably coming. If she gives a few more speeches, I think it's going to come. Yeah, have you seen the way he's talked about Kamala Harris over the last week or so?
Yeah, it's so exhausting. It's just, why aren't we over this by now? I'm over it. Just let's move on. It's like the whole birtherism thing. I'm like, this didn't work out well for you the first time. Why are we bringing it back?
Yeah, or did it? I mean, what percentage of the American public still thinks that Obama wasn't born in America? Like, I think if the goal was to inspire 20 million Americans to believe something insane, I think it worked in that respect.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, as far as, he still got elected though, so at the end of the day, who cares? Can we just focus on other things besides half of the dumb things that come out of Trump's mouth? I feel like it takes up so much of our mental capacity, and it's on Twitter, and it just stresses us all out, and it's just like, oh God, why do we have to talk about this? But we have to because he's the president, unfortunately.
Yeah. And also, I'm hoping to end 2020 with Anderson Cooper silver hair, so I have to follow Trump on Twitter. It's the fastest road to that.
Yeah, that could be a good look.
Yeah. Bart, our producer, says Robert Johnson wrote the song Crossroads, a song about meeting and making a deal with the devil at the crossroads. John Kasich standing at the crossroads is not a good sign. That's true. Tom Will on Twitch says Bernie is a politician, not an activist. There are different roles in society. Activists push from the outside of government, politicians from the inside. They run on different rules. People who complain about Bernie supporting Biden don't understand how. I think that with Bernie, he straddles the line more than a lot of other politicians do in terms of his willingness to, stand on picket lines. And, I've covered him at actual union protests and things like that. Yeah, he's not a total outside of government activist, but I think he has a lot more respect for that component of this whole thing than many politicians do.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely seen both sides of it, which I think gives him a lot of credibility and a lot of compassion both ways, And I think it is important. People are always asking me if I would consider running for some kind of local office. And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think that's my role in any of this, because it's two different things, it's the politics, and AOC actually has talked a lot about that, how when she first got to Congress, there was lobbyists just busting down her door trying to get her to compromise here in exchange for this and all these other things. So it's just like a different animal.
Yeah. One more super chat. Matt Wiviot says, John, I saw you on Russell Brand. Yeah, I saw that too. It's funny that the thing that finally got me into one of Russell Brand's videos was talking about Ben Shapiro and WAP. Anyway, if anybody wants to go take a look, he just uses a short section of me talking about it. Anyway, and Russell Brand, he's actually been on our network before. We should probably pursue him to come back on.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Okay. With that, everybody, continue sending in your comments and super chats. We'll respond more a little bit later on. But while we're here, I'm assuming to my remote production team, are we at 2 out of 3 videos for the next segment, or do we have all 3? We have all 3?
We got all 3, baby.
Thank you. I wonder if people can hear Skip when he speaks. I wonder. Maybe we'll never know. Okay, so why don't we jump back into that then? One of the most exciting things to watch through this election is Trump going to accept the results? And we honestly won't know until the end, but let's exhaust ourselves and stress ourselves out by checking in on the current state of it. So here he is in Wisconsin at one of his rallies talking about the only way he can lose this election.
So we have to win the election. We can't play games, get out and vote, do those beautiful absentee ballots, or just make sure your vote gets counted. Make sure, because the only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election. So we have to be very careful. Look, this is more than this election. That's a big statement. The only way they're going to win is that way, and we can't let that happen.
Okay, so that multiple times there he said the only way they can lose. That was not all of the times in that speech. That was just one section. He said it at other points as well. So that's the only way. Is that, Yasmin, is that like political hyperbole? I'm so confident. Or do you think that that is setting his audience up to believe that Biden winning by its very nature cannot be legitimate?
100% the latter. It harkens back, I think, also to back when he was on the campaign trail back in 2015. And he kept saying, I'm the only one who can fix all these problems. It's only me. And this kind of rhetoric, this verbiage that he's choosing to use is very deliberate. You know, it is kind of like, I don't want to say brainwashing, but yeah, it is hyperbolic. And it is a form, maybe a mild form of it, but it's still a form of fear mongering. You know, if this happens, it's because of this. And it's almost like he's priming his audience to be angry before there's anything to be angry about. It's almost like if you tell someone this is what's going to happen and then it happens and they believe everything else that you said, all the other reasons why that they've already given you. It's like, oh, well, he already said it, you know, so he must be onto something. He must know something that we don't. Trump doesn't know anything. Okay.
Nothing. He doesn't know anything you know or don't know. He knows absolutely nothing. Yeah. And just ask yourself, if he continually says the only way I can lose is if it's rigged, does that strike you as the position of a person who is confident that they will win?
No, and I think that's also the more puzzling part of everything. As far as his supporters, he's still hang on all of his words. It's like, how do you reconcile these two things? This man who thinks that he deserves the presidency, who thinks that he can't be beat from the presidency, but also at the same time is sabotaging the USPS and then is doing all these other things to ensure that he wins the election. But of course, if he wins by rigging, it's not rigging.
Yeah.
It's only if Joe Biden does.
Yeah, and so two other comments that he gave that I'm not going to subject you to the video of, but I wanted to at least mention was one, the joke that he tells, which is we're going to win 4 more years, and then we're going to get 4 more years because they spied on my campaign, so we get a redo on 4 years.
Oh my God.
He's just joking, though. You know, it's a funny joke from a guy who locks people up and, you know, bombs people and tells his supporters to, you know, viciously maul protesters. It's just a joke about being an authoritarian ruler,
Trump's
buddy.
A funny guy. You probably just don't get a sense of humor, John.
I'm probably too dumb.
So nuance to his humor, you know. You got to be really, really smart to get it. So.
I think you're right. I got to stop being so triggered by his very funny comedy. Okay, anyway, and then the other thing.
Says what is on his mind all the time. He makes a lot of jokes. So
yeah, the funniest thing I think from the video we showed you was absentee ballots are okay. Beautiful absentee ballots, those are okay. No, but that's like he will. It's like 1984. He will have a crowd saying, "No mail-in ballots. Yes, absentee ballots. No mail-in ballots." Like, and it works. They believe it. They have that amount of mental flexibility and no more to believe that those two things are simultaneously true. And the question is going to be, or the interesting thing to see will be, how many of his followers will do those things? Because they're the same thing. Will they trust it or will they not? Because he's giving them vastly different messages depending on the second.
If I was a Trump supporter, I would be very confused all the time. Like, I wouldn't know how to act. I wouldn't know what to believe. And that's if I only listened to the things that Trump said himself, to only the things that came out of his own mouth. And it is weird because some people, they will just waffle back and forth. And I saw on Twitter one day, somebody said, you know, if Trump's saying to wear a mask, we should do it for him because he has done so much for us. And it was like, well, what? So they really will just kind of do all these things just because he said so. And that's the extent of their thought process in that regard.
Yeah.
It seems at least.
I hate the impulse behind that, but honestly, I just want to be able to resume my life. So sure, wear a mask because Trump has done so much for us. Whatever, just wear a mask.
If that gets you to do it, then fine. But then the trouble is that like the next day he's like, you don't need to if you don't want to. You know, like he changes his mind and then he negates the things that he said because he was in a bad mood that day or whatever. You know.
Yeah. They're selling Trump 2020 masks on his website while he and all of his supporters say that masks are a like socialist plot to destroy the Constitution. He's selling them.
Amazing. That's
anyway.
amazing. Yeah. Impressive.
Okay, So in response to the video we just showed you, let's turn to another aspect of this. Chris Wallace, one of the last Republicans on Fox News who's willing to question Donald Trump. The rest are in lockstep with him. They're afraid of being called fake news, which in fact earlier this week he did call them fake news. Right. So here he is talking about Trump's talk about how the only way he can lose is if it's rigged.
Look, the president obviously is going to make the case for himself and make the case against Joe Biden. But this is troubling, and he did it in my interview with him, I guess, 3 weeks ago. He's done it repeatedly before and since. The argument that if he loses, it's because the election was stolen from him, not because a majority of Americans voted against him. Obviously, one of the things that we treasure in this country is the peaceful transition of power. Not saying that Joe Biden's going to win and Donald Trump's going to lose, but if that should happen, and there's certainly a possibility that it will, one would hope that whoever wins, whoever loses, that both sides will agree that was the judgment of the American people and they're going to abide by it.
So, Yasmin, I want to ask you a question. I've debated with several different people on the show over the course of the past month or so. Based on everything that you've seen and what you understand about American politics, the fears that I guess even implicit in this segment I'm expressing about how the election is going to go, how the days or week after the election are going to go, are we going to have a smooth transfer of power? Do you share those fears, or do you think that in the end we'll have an election pretty much like any other election?
No, we're not going to have an election just like every other election. It's already not that. And I think I've been saying this for a while, that Trump will not go quietly if he is not elected in November. I've been saying it for a long time, and people, I think that I'm hyperbolic or overreacting whenever I say things like that. But I was like, why? I mean, I don't have any inside information here. I'm just going off of what he said. It's all there. If he loses the election, it was rigged, right? He's already sabotaging the USPS to enable this. He doesn't deny that Russia has been helping him. He says all kinds of things like, what did he say the other day? Oh yeah, all of his jokes about the election. He was saying that I'll only leave if I agree with the results. What does that even mean? Like, he's already disagreeing with the, projected results, He's not going anywhere. He makes jokes about staying longer, which he's done in the past before. Like, this isn't the first time that he's alluded to serving longer than 8 years as the president. So no, I don't think it's going to go easy. It's already not easy. He's already doing all these things to kind of dismantle the system. And then any checks and balances that we would have had on that is not in place either, or not to the point that I'm confident in them. Congress hasn't done anything to stop him this far. I don't expect them to start in November. And then also the military and the police, all these things, it's just not lining up well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the oversight, we've got, they're going to bring DeJoy and some other post office officials in. Is that going to accomplish much? Yesterday, Francesca and I talked about it, and we don't have high expectations for that. I don't know. I guess we'll see. I want to be surprised. Yeah, I'd love to be.
There's all these things that happen, and it sounds good, but at the end of the day, what's going to happen? It's the same Congress that we're working with. It's the same president that we're working with. We already know what their goals and their motives are. We already know what they are not willing to do and what they are willing to do, as far as basically just sucking up to this president for the sake of having a Republican president. So I'm not optimistic going forward.
Well, so Chris Wallace there, you had pushing back a little bit against the president's rhetoric. It's a moment perhaps for conservatives on Fox News to sort of soberly reflect on the way Trump has talked about this. Is this actually how we want an incumbent president to be talking about the election? And so this morning we have a new tone, a totally changed tone from Donald Trump. Here he is talking about the election.
The Democrats want to make it a political issue. It's not a political issue. It's really about a correct vote. You have to get voting right. You can't have millions and millions of ballots sent all over the place, sent to people that are dead, sent to dogs, cats, sent everywhere. This is a serious situation. This isn't games, and you have to get it right. I just want to get it right. Win, lose, or draw. I think we're going to win. Win, lose, or draw, we have to get it right. You can't take millions of ballots, send them haphazardly all over the country or all over a state, and expect to come out properly. And if you look at the last 10 elections where they did this universal, and by the way, absentee is great. It's been working for a long time, like in Florida. Absentee, you request, and it comes in, and then you send it back. Absentee is great, but universal is going to be a disaster, the likes of which our country has never seen. It'll end up being a rigged election, or they will never come out with an outcome. They'll have to do it again. And nobody wants that, and I don't want that.
Okay, so again, absentee is okay because there you have to request the ballot and then send it in. Mail-in ballot isn't okay because he falsely believes that they just send out millions of ballots to anybody, no matter who, whether they're a human or a cat or a dog. None of that is true. It's the same exact process.
Get this stuff from? I don't know about you, but my bird in the garage doesn't have a mailing address. It's unbelievable.
I think its address is your garage now.
I guess. This is probably it. I should register him, right? But he just keeps repeating the same things over and over again, which is it's like an authoritarian tactic almost. Just to keep repeating things, whether or not you have any basis for them, whether or not they're grounded in anything, any kind of reality or fact or figures. But the more you say it, the more ingrained it becomes in people's minds. And then next thing you know, they start repeating it. And then it becomes a whole thing. So there's no evidence that anyone's dog is getting an absentee ballot in the mail. But people will believe it now that it's just come out of his mouth. Now it's a thing. He wished it into existence.
And the thing that I'm worried about is it kills me to listen to these videos and then play them, but we have to know what messaging is going out to his fans. And so the idea that it's likely to be rigged, he's been saying that now, that's a standard line. The idea that it might take days or weeks or months or years to know who won, which again isn't true, that's a standard line. But now he's mixed in, they might have to do it again. We might need a do-over election, which nobody believes. It's not true, but that's an additional thing that his fans are going to start talking about, that the Dems are setting up where, we might not be able to trust the first result. Maybe we got to do a second election. It's not going to happen, but it is leading millions of Americans to have insane expectations about how the first couple of weeks of November are likely to go. And if you can get them to believe those sorts of things, you can get them to accept happily the Supreme Court stepping in and shutting down the counting of mail-in voting and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my point from earlier is, all these things, he's lining them up very deliberately, very specifically, so that come November, come January, he has the buy-in that he needs already. It's already been there. He's already had people buy in since 2016 almost. Yeah. People are willing to believe whatever he tells them. He's the only source that they need. If nobody else confirms it, it's because they're all, paid out, or they're the mainstream media and you can't trust them anyway, or it's fake news, whatever it is. I mean, the whole fake news thing in and of itself was brilliant because he just immediately from the beginning discredited anything that any of the major news networks had to say. So anyone who denies him or criticizes him, easy, fake news. It's just really easy. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to apply a whole lot of mental thought or, introspection even. You just say, oh, fake news, easy.
Yeah, it's been convenient.
Mm-hmm.
All the average American wants, most humans, but especially Americans, is a reason to not have to think about things that make their brains hurt. Like uncomfortable things, inconvenient truths, and those sorts of things. And fake news is a get out of thinking free card for every aspect of life.
I wish I had that.
Exactly. It's all fake. This is fake news. You're on fake news. You don't even have to listen to me. You can just talk about whatever you want. Okay, so let's read some super chats before we launch into other stories. Chub Toad says, we need a skip cam. We're going to work on that. And apparently people can hear skip. That's what I hear. Some people say they can't. You have to believe if you want to hear skip.
I don't think so.
Wait, did I hear it? Okay, Amanda W says, good morning, Dragon Squad. My spouse's camping trip was canceled and she's pretty bummed. Can she get a shout out? Thanks. Amanda's camping buddy, this is your shout out. I'm sorry, it sucks when a trip is canceled. That's the worst kind of cancel culture is trip cancel culture.
Oh God, yeah, I know. All about
exactly. Jackson Price with a big super chat saying Trump supporters think that it's the Dems who are attacking the USPS, while also thinking that the Dems are pushing mail-in ballots because they will delay the election results and give them the win. This comes from my Trump supporting grandma. Yeah.
You know what's brilliant about all of that is how the Republicans can take something that they're actively doing or something that they are, something that represents them, and then they flip it and make it seem like, oh, this is Democrats. They're doing it, right? So, for example, when Kamala Harris was the nominee for VP, I saw on Twitter they were talking about how the Democrats are racist and misogynistic because we nominated a woman of color to be the vice president. I was like, how did you even do that in your head? How did you get there? But that's what they do, so.
Yeah, Corey Lewandowski said that making sure that they were only going to pick a woman is like bringing politics back to the 1920s, you know, when all vice president picks were women.
What is that?
Anyway, I don't know. Okay, so a little bit of conversation about Skip on Twitch with Kelly June saying Skip is the dragon keeper. He takes care of us and the dragons. Mariah says Skip is Merlin. That's funny. I don't know if anyone's watching Cursed, but that's interesting. Pinker Bell Pixie says, thank you, Sky God Skip. And, and there was a comment earlier. So, Yasmin, one of the things that's happened recently on the show is whenever a new person is on the show, they get designated or have to choose which superhero they are. And so before the show, we were talking about how you've played Gloomhaven recently, which isn't about superheroes.
Yeah.
But it's pretty nerdy, let's admit that. So are you a fan of Marvel or DC or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. I'm a big Marvel fan. I actually, like, before I did videos, I did a lot of blogs, like articles, and half of them are just about like Marvel movies that I was watching, and I was like, this reminds me of this, and I would write about it. But and even now in my videos, I'll make some Marvel references. I have a huge crush on Captain America because who doesn't? But if I had to choose myself to be a superhero, it'd be Black Widow, hands down, because she doesn't have superpowers, right? She's very small like me, but she learned how to leverage her weight and fight these bad guys, and I think it's super cool. And she was a spy, like that's awesome.
That's true. She seems to know a lot about politics.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, you're in luck because I think that the fans tried to designate Francesca as Black Widow, but Francesca didn't want to be affiliated with a character who was played by Scarlett Johansson. So I think it's still open. I think you can have it.
If we can separate the actress from she's funny to me. I don't. She's sometimes she says things and I'm like, you could have just not said that and it would have been fine, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
She brings on a lot of the problems herself.
Yeah, she talking about acting and roles and stuff, but she's good. She was really good in Jojo Rabbit. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I just watched that recently actually. I really liked it.
Yeah, I liked it too. It was good. Okay, with that, let's jump back on the news because time she is a-wasting. So let's talk about the coronavirus. The pandemic response continues in that way that the government really doesn't seem to be doing anything and like 1,000 people die per day. Is that a failure, though? Not necessarily. Here, take a look at Jared Kushner.
Yeah, more than 170,000 Americans are now dead from this pandemic over the past 5 or 6 months. Are 170,000 dead Americans, would you still suggest that this has been a success story?
Yes, look, there was a lot of challenges. This has been a global pandemic, a lot of unprecedented challenges. Again, the first phase of it, people didn't know what to expect. A lot of it was happening in different states. The president was able to rush the supplies that we needed. Now we're in the middle phase where we're using all the knowledge we have right now to deal with strategically how do we learn from what we had and protect the vulnerable.
Okay, so 170,000 dead, it is a success. And he said the only issue was that early on we didn't know what to expect. You know, we were just blindsided by this, which is completely not true. Yes, there's stuff about the virus that we didn't know, but we had a pretty good idea of what might be necessary to stop its spread. You know, like people having PPE and things like that. The mistakes that were made in the first few months can't just be washed away by saying, hey, what are you going to do? It was new.
Yeah, it's, you know, there's a grocery store chain here in Texas called HEB, right?
Oh, I know HEB.
Had the best coronavirus response that I'd seen, and so grateful for HEB. I can't even tell you, you know, like they single-handedly helped us through this entire pandemic, and they started planning for this when the virus was still over in China. So if HEB knows about coronavirus enough to have the foresight to plan ahead, right? I mean, they stocked up and they were, you know, extending their hours, all kinds of things that they were doing. How did our federal government miss it? You know, like we all knew what was happening. We saw it happening across Asia and then across Europe. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't know what else he would have said though. I don't expect Jared Kushner to come out and be like, yeah, we kind of screwed it all up. Like there's things we should have done better, but he's not going to say that, unfortunately. But in not saying that, he's excusing himself and he's giving his supporters a reason to say, oh, it's not that bad, when the reality is, you posted on Twitter that our hometown has a smaller population than the amount of people who have died now from coronavirus, which is insane. And what's funny about that is our hometown is actually the biggest city in Connecticut. So it's like it's a major city, major for Connecticut, but it's a major city, and more people than that entire population have died from coronavirus. And that was a big wake-up call for me. And then even, the town that I'm in right now has an even smaller population. I'm in a suburb.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's devastating. And of course he's not going to admit that, which is why we have to play his comments and make sure that people get the correct information. Yeah, 170,000 people have died. And yes, it is a global pandemic, as Jared Kushner said, but we can also acknowledge that America has failed in its response, the worst out of any country. And honestly, with the exception of like Brazil and Russia recently, over the past few months, we have almost singularly failed. And so you don't get to say that it's this constant across the world, this global pandemic. No, I want to talk about the variables. What is it about America that has caused us to fail? And part of it is choices. And let's just briefly update people on one of the sets of choices that have been pushed by the administration over the past 2 months or so. And that is, we got to have the sports. We've talked about that. But we also got to go back to schools. And kids don't even get it. And they're not going to die. And they don't really spread it. So don't worry about it. Well, maybe we should worry, because Mississippi public schools have confirmed 199 cases among students and 245 among teachers. School districts have ordered over 2,000 students and almost 600 teachers to quarantine for 2 weeks. Schools in 71 of Mississippi's 82 counties have reported cases. The Daily Tar Heel reported that UNC Chapel Hill announces that it's going to transition all of its classes to fully online instruction. Why? Maybe because the university's COVID-19 positivity rate rose from 2.8% to 13.6% last week. And so all of these schools have come back in a session very recently. It has taken virtually no time for it to spread throughout colleges, high schools, and elementary schools as well. These are the sorts of choices that we keep getting wrong that cause us to have failed worse than any other country when it comes to the response to this pandemic.
I think what is the most baffling part of all of this is who is in charge. Who are these governors? I mean, I live in Texas, so I can talk to you about bad governors and all their bad faith decisions that they make and the rest of us have to live with. But I always wonder, what are people's expectations? What did you think was going to happen? And what was your plan? Did you have any kind of contingency plan? Did you have any kind of just insight? What kind of precautions were you taking? And unfortunately, a lot of them, whenever you do hear about them, they're not enough. You have elementary school children going to school and trading masks with one another because they don't know you're not supposed to trade these things. And I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, throughout this whole thing, one of my biggest successes was not having a child, and having to deal with that on top of, all the things that parents deal with these days with homeschooling and now sending their kids back to school. It's so much. It's too much.
Yeah, and it is. And what was that?
It was all preventable. That's the worst part of it, is we didn't have to be here where we are this bad at this point. There were so many things that could have been done, that should have been done up to this point, that would have put us in a much better position than we're in now. But unfortunately, I think the big part of why America, the United States specifically, is struggling with this so bad, it's just a culture thing.
Yeah. No, totally. We could have had, 20,000 dead. It would have been devastating. It would have been worse than swine flu, let alone Ebola or anything like that. But it could have been a hell of a lot better. It could have been, one Bridgeport, Connecticut better in terms of the death toll. But we have gotten lots of things wrong, and we will continue to. I don't know about Houston, but I walk around and see the vast majority of people still not wearing masks. Mm-hmm. And we have, our top elected officials are still wishy-washy at best on it. Trump isn't telling people they need to wear masks and they need to socially distance and all of that. And now I read a headline earlier today. America's alt-right is fueling Europe's anti-mask protests. Yeah. Europeans, they're sharing coronavirus conspiracy theories and photos of U.S. protests to plan their own. So not only have we ruined our response, but we're doing our best to make sure that Europe gets messed up as well.
Well, what's so funny about that to me is, up to this point, a lot of the conspiracy theories that have come out about coronavirus were very, they would kind of fall apart as soon as you say, well, what about the rest of the world? This is not just an American problem. This is not just a thing that the US government is doing. And they're like, oh, all the other world governments are in cahoots with us. And I was like, that seems like a stretch. Like, I don't know how you would prove that or assert that even. So it is interesting. I am curious to see what these Europeans actually believe and think and how they're distinguishing it, especially since they've been dealing with it for so much longer than we have.
Yeah. And by the way, here's one prediction that I'm definitely going to make. If they're successful, if the alt-right creates these, no mask, no distance protests, and they start putting pressure on their governments to not require people to take these minor precautions, it will result in numbers going up. And that will be used by Trump and his administration to say, hey, look, we're not the only ones who are failing. We already know. He recently announced that New Zealand's numbers are spiking. Do you know what they spiked to on the date he was talking about?
What?
9 cases.
Oh my God, yeah.
But the percentage exploded. Think about the percentages, Yasmin. And so if it happens in France and Germany, and because of us, they're going to claim that that's a justification for the response we've had and how it's not that big of an issue. Because look, other countries are having it bad too. And it's going to happen. It
really emboldens the conspiracy theorists, but it's more strange to me how aligned Trump is with the conspiracy theorists and how he is focused on getting them on, well, because they think that he's the savior. They think that all the bad things in the world, Trump is going to fix them. He isn't the bad thing. He's going to fix the bad thing. So I don't blame him, I guess, for pandering. It seems right up his alley.
Yeah, it does. Okay, 1 or 2 quick super chats, and we're going to roll through to our last story because we are running low on time, and my dog really wants to go outside, so we only have so much longer. Laura says, gotta say the DNC has been effective encouraging me to vote this cycle despite falling short of many progressive policies. Well, I can't say for sure. I can't speak for anyone, including Laura, but I would assume that how devastating the past few years have been could convince one to vote, even if the DNC isn't really giving us much. I don't know.
Yeah.
Brian says, trying to make up for missing a couple streams last week. Love the work you guys do. Stay safe, healthy, and sane. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. Oh, let's see. Sean says, this Yasmin girl is awesome. Bring her back more often.
Yay, thank you.
Well, you know. Little love in super chats. Okay. Kelly June on Twitch says, Central Pennsylvania is in the house. Yay. Thank you, Kelly. She also said, I love John Iadarola in all caps, like it was a Trump tweet. Thank you. Okay. Claire Wilson says, Jared Kushner always looks like he's smelling his own farts. That's true. That's true. He's got that Tucker Carlson look on his face. Yeah. Sue says, my cat has never been able to vote absentee. Maybe this time. Maybe this time.
Yeah.
And let's see. Chakuseki says, Dementia Don tweeted out yesterday, save the post office. Please describe your visceral response to his thought process. Mine is nausea. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I think I posted it on Instagram. I was just like, I can't stand this guy. I give up. I didn't look any further into the tweet. I didn't look into the context. I was just over it, and I was like, all right. Yeah. So that was my response.
I couldn't respond in words because they would have all been very foul. So I actually went to Photoshop and I created a fake tweet from the star of Jaws that just tweeted, save the swimmers. And I sent that out.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah. It's
my response.
Ridiculous. I can't even wrap my head around it.
It's like a serial killer. He's got his hands around your throat. Let her breathe.
You're like, all right.
Yeah.
I give up. Just all right.
Okay, and let's see. Okay. Fatty says, at least that if he loses, there's a small chance he'll call it the greatest, most tremendous loss in history of elections. Yasmin, here's what I need out of you. For just 1 minute, while I let this dog out, if we know the result on election day, and if Trump doesn't fight it, what are some of your initial reactions going to be after the years we've had? Okay? And I'm going to be back in 1 second.
He doesn't win and he doesn't fight it.
Exactly. He's gonna transition out. We're moving into a new phase. After all that we've been through, what are some of your reactions to that?
I don't trust it. I don't trust him at all. Whenever he does something that seems sensible, I inherently distrust it. And maybe that's just because I'm a pessimistic person. I don't know. I don't consider myself to be pessimistic actually, but there always is a reason behind the things that he does, right?
Trump,
And it's
Trump,
never,
you're saying?
and it always comes out eventually. It's really sometimes just a matter of waiting to see what kind of payout he got from something, or what kind of ulterior motive he had, or who he was trying to persuade to do this other thing. So even the good things that he does, it's like, okay, well, why'd you do that? You know, like he keeps saying that we need term limits for senators and congresspeople, which I agree with, and I feel like I've been saying that for a long time, but I don't trust it coming from him. I don't know why he's saying it. So especially since he's trying to eradicate term limits for the presidency.
Yeah, I mean, for the Senate, my suspicion would be it's become a new thing again on the right to say that we should go back to not having direct election of senators. Perhaps talking about term limits is a way to get people to accept massive changes to the way they're elected. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, with that, let's jump into our last big topic of the day. We don't have much time, but we're going to do what we can. Just a couple of years ago, Donald Trump supported recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel rather than Tel Aviv, which previous administrations had done. Now, he gave reasons at the time for why he did that, but yesterday, speaking about that decision, the reasons were a little bit different. Take a look.
And we moved the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. That's for the evangelicals. You know, it's amazing with that. The evangelicals are more excited about that than Jewish people. It's really, right? It's incredible.
It is incredible. It's incredible that he said that, because obviously that's why. If you know anything about evangelical Christianity, their beliefs about the end times and, you know, millennialism and all of that, this is a thing that they have wanted. But past Republicans and even Trump at the time had explained it as being what's best for Israel and America and the Palestinians somehow, despite, you know, what all the people in the area would say. He said that was the reason. Now he's acknowledging, no, it's because of, you know, American evangelicals that he made this potentially dangerous choice.
Yeah, and, you know, we kind of mentioned earlier that this is kind of in my wheelhouse as far as the kind of videos that I do, but I have actually been hesitant to do a video on Israel and Palestine for a long time because, first of all, it's so complex. There's so many layers to it, but also people get really, really passionate about it to the point where it almost doesn't make sense to me. You know, I remember in 9th grade, world geography, we had a mock trial, Palestine versus Israel. I don't know, it seems very progressive for a 9th grade in public school, but we did it. And I mean, within maybe 10 minutes of this mock trial happening, and we had been preparing for it for a week at that point, both sides, everything just fell apart. You know, the Israel side called Jesus up to the stand, and that was it. We were just like, where do we go from here? But the thing with this particular, you know, peace deal, if you want to call it that, first of all, they keep talking about peace in the Middle East as if that's even a thing. It's not. They make it sound like there's a bunch of Arab people sitting on a peninsula fighting with one another, but they're forgetting to mention that there's so many other powers working there. And that's why it's so unstable. There's the US, there's Russia, there's China, there's the UK, the UN, the EU, then there's all the oil and gas companies that are over there. Then there's all these like smaller rebel groups that don't necessarily work in compliance or allegiance with the countries that they're living within, right? So there's so many things going on in this one region. And then on top of that, there's a history of how we got to this point, which is also very, very complex. But I was watching an interview with a professor over at Johns Hopkins, and he's an expert on all this, and he made a really, really good point. What he said was that Donald Trump hasn't really had a successful foreign policy win. You know, he's had a lot of near wins, a lot of things that sounded good but didn't actually do a whole lot. You know, North Korea, haven't really heard a whole lot since the last time we heard about that, which feels like, you know, 15 years ago. But he needed a win. And this feels and sounds like a win, even though it really probably won't change very much from what's already happening over there. The UAE was always kind of friendly with Israel and Saudi Arabia. And if you know, Saudi Arabia is allied with the US and they're in opposition to Iran. So there's so many different things going on. It's not the win that they want it to be, or they're trying to make it sound like it is. But it is going to be favorable with those evangelicals, and he needs that vote.
I think you're right. He does need a perceived win, and you're also right that it's complicated. So many different groups and factions involved in this, which is why I think it's probably most responsible to just let American evangelicals decide what our decisions will be made in the Middle East. But anyway, I want to give people a few details about the deal. So, Skip, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to the fourth graphic, I believe. The U.S., Israel, and the UAE put out a joint statement outlining how the two Middle Eastern nations will develop ties in numerous areas, including investment, security, tourism, technology, and energy, and will establish formal embassies in each other's countries. Israel will, quote, suspend declaring sovereignty over parts of the West Bank that it had previously expressed interest to annex. In exchange, the UAE will treat Israel as it would any other country it has friendly relations with, making it only the third Arab country to have such open relations with Jerusalem. Now, for the most part, the bounds of the deal sound okay. The question will be how much they will actually be followed, because Israel has made any number of promises about not taking territory that they've then gone back on. So the question will be, will they be more likely to follow the bounds of a deal with the UAE than they have been with previous agreements with the United States? Tune in to see. But we do have to just briefly acknowledge that some of the talk about the deal has seemed a little bit odd, including this quote from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which had been posted and then taken down for reasons that'll become obvious, when he said, the deal connects the UAE with Israel. Both of them are advanced democracies and their societies are advanced. UAE might be advanced. It's not an advanced democracy. It's a hereditary monarchy where political freedoms are very limited. And I get that you're going to say nice things about the country you just made a deal with, but they don't suddenly become a representative democracy because you have enhanced trade relations with them. That's not how it actually works.
I mean, even Israel is arguable as far as their democratic policies and the way that they function. And it is important to note that, well, you mentioned it earlier, just because Israel, like the shining beacon of all of this seems to be that Israel will not illegally annex parts of Palestine into their country. It was already illegal, you're not supposed to do this in the first place. And they've been doing it. They've been having all these illegal settlements in Palestine. The Palestinians cannot fight back. And it's just like, why would we believe you? Just because you said it this time, it's like, well, you're going to anyway. So it's just a matter of time.
We have a comment from Hanan Ashrawi, a member of the executive committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization that had similar elements to what you were saying Israel got rewarded for not declaring openly what it's been doing to Palestine illegally and persistently since the beginning of this occupation. The UAE has come out in the open on its secret dealings and normalization with Israel. Please don't do us a favor. We are nobody's fig leaf. And so, I would imagine, I haven't watched a ton of, American cable news analysis of this deal, but I would imagine the concerns and fears of Palestinians are probably not being put front and center when it comes to what this deal is going to do to the status quo there, let alone what America's contribution to that situation has been, including in things like earlier when we were talking about recognizing the capital being Jerusalem.
Yeah, I mean, Americans really, the minute that you speak out in a pro-Palestine way, no matter how objectively you try to look at the situation, it's never received well, which is, like, I think I said earlier, I never really understood it fully, aside from just Semitism and just general being pro-Israel or anti-Israel or whatever, but it's not about being pro or anti any of it. It's about what the law is, it's what parameters are put in place, and these are the parameters that are not being abided against, and that's it. You were told not to do this, you agreed to it, and then you did it anyway. So why is it a problem to say you shouldn't have done that?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we are coming to the close of our time, but Yasmin, it's been great to have you on for the first time on the show. The response from the audience seemed very positive. If people would like to see more of your work, where can they do that?
You can follow me on Instagram. That's where all my stuff lives. I have a YouTube. I just started it, so it's not very robust, but you can follow me there so you can bump me up to like 10 followers. That would be appreciated. My Instagram is, it's on the screen. Yeah, there's 5 Z's in there because sometimes you need a lot of Z's. I don't know. That's just what happened when I set it up, and we're sticking with it. So.
That's happened with some of my older email addresses.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, it's been great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was great. This was fun.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Yes.
And everybody at home, let me read just a couple more super chats before we close out for the day. Carl Jones asks, are there rules for the super chat? Not swearing, looking for help for protesters in Portsmouth, issued federal warrants, alleged statue involvement, won't let me send deets, solidarity. Yeah, so I don't know what the actual requirements are in terms of what super chats will allow you to post, but if you tweet it to me, there's a much better chance that I'll get anything that would be filtered out by a super chat. But thank you for that. Let's see. The Only KG says, what is Fox News really saying about Trump's attacks on USPS? So from what I have seen, it is complex, but they seem to be going with his new narrative, which is that it is the Democrats that are denying the post office the money that they need, which is a total about-face from Trump saying that the post office has been wasteful and shouldn't need the extra money, which is what he was saying earlier this year. But, you know, that's the job of a Fox News host, is just go along with whatever he's most recently saying. Ian Kinsale says, with this mid-pandemic USPS crisis, are Dems discussing their ground game to make sure people can vote safely and get counted? What if this crisis suppresses unenthusiastic Biden supporters? Well, Ian, that is only my biggest concern going into this election. It's one of the reasons we wanted to make sure that we did not have a nominee, I should say, that would not provide enough enthusiasm to make sure that as many people as possible actually want to vote. And I think that we are in that situation. I do think there's going to be a lot of organizations and a lot of money going into it, especially in terms of the mail-in voting. But yeah. Over on Twitch, Onakazi says, John answering the age-old question, he let the dogs out. Him, John. That's true, or at least one of them. Let's see. Galfar says, Skip is TYT's version of the Vision. He works well with Brad's Iron Man. I think you mean Bart there. I think that's a reference to Bart, but thank you, Galfar, for that comment. Thank you to Obi-Mom Kenobi, as well as Pinkerbell Pixie for gifting some subs. Really appreciate that. Steph Mont subscribed for 3 months in a row. Thank you, Steph Mont, who says, 3 months on Twitch, but I am at like 2.5 years as an activist member of the website and around 7 years watching. Wow, Steph Mont. That is right up around to the beginning of when I actually worked for TYT. So thank you for your support over so many years. Jess Ortega over on #TDR Live echoed a comment from Yasmin earlier saying, yes, exactly my reasoning for not having children as well. I'm not alone. So amazing to hear another woman speak the same things I've thought my entire life and never aspired for. Speaking truth. Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Jess. That's a very nice comment there. I'm sure Yasmin appreciates it. And no, we're unfortunately over. And I have 2 interviews that I'm going to be conducting, very exciting interviews. I'm going to be talking with a representative of 350.org. Maybe we'll be talking about Anwar a little bit there. And Jackson White, who you've probably seen on the Young Turks, is going to be joining me. We're going to be breaking down a little bit about his app Politiscope, as well as a little bit more on the DNC from last night. So definitely stay tuned for that. And just like last night when I joined Cenk Uygur, we are going to have live TYT commentary along the DNC tonight. I believe Benjamin Dixon is going to be joining Cenk, so you're not going to want to miss that. It's going to be starting at, I believe, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So stay tuned on all of the normal places you can watch TYT. Tomorrow, JR joins me, and we've got a lot of exciting stuff for the rest of this week as well. So I will see you then. Thank you for joining us today, and stay safe out there.